Hi, I'm Kevin EuDaly. Here's a little bit of what you'll see in this episode. On Monday, November 11th, we were up at dawn in Anderson, South Carolina to do some shooting on Pickens Railroad. It was rather damp and cloudy, but there's two jobs that normally work out of Anderson. One is called the Anderson job, and it goes north into Anderson and switches several industries there in town. The other is called the Belton job, and it goes up to Anderson and then turns east and goes over to Belton and then goes down to an interchange with the Greenville and Western. And when they get to the interchange with the Greenville and Western, south of Belton, they will often go on south. They have a couple of customers between there and Hake Path, and they'll go down and switch those. And on this particular day, the Anderson job had an XCSX-840B, so we skipped that almost entirely and spent the day with a pair of U18Bs, 9508 and 9503, on the Belton job. Chased them all the way over to the Greenville and Western, and that's a fun chase. U18Bs are a critter all their own. They have a very unique sound with their 8-cylinder GE prime movers. And there's a sign at the interchange that stands for Pickens Hake Path, because they used to have several lines, including the namesake line that ran to Pickens, South Carolina. So they had two-letter designations for those various different locations they operated. But now everything is run out of Anderson. Tuesday, November 12th, dawn clear, so we were set up with sunshine all morning, and we chased the same pair of U18Bs east up to Anderson, across to Belton, and down to the Greenville and Western interchange. And then some days they interchange and then run south to serve the two customers they have south of the interchange. And other days they'll run down to the customers first and then come back and do the interchange. I think it probably depends on whether Greenville and Western is ready for them or not. On this particular day, they ran south first, came back light engine, and so we chased them back to the interchange, and at that point, we were really needing to move west. So we abandoned ship at that point and drove west for the next phase of our trip, which would start at Vicksburg on the KCS. end the trip with light engines. Shishka.
So we're gonna leave from here and not up the road a little bit. Right?
What do you mean?
As in not here, but, or I mean as in not up ahead, but here, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's going to go back and
He's gonna go get his stuff.
get his stuff, but we're not going to wait for that, I don't think. We'd be dark 30 to get to Vicksburg. You know what? I ought to pull in here and take a look at the map. See what the route is. Make sure it's not faster going the other way. I'm just driving aimlessly about. Look at that poor ant hill that's been flattened. Wednesday, November 13th, dawn cloudy, and we had considered going to Artesia and shooting all the locals that run in and out of there. That former KCS facility with all of its BB, EMD power, mostly all still in the Bell scheme. But we opted for Vicksburg, Mississippi. And Vicksburg, the main target of the morning would be the JV 101 local, which in this case ran with a pair of BB bells. And it's a local that originates in Jackson and runs to Vicksburg to interchange with the Vicksburg and Southern at the yard that they share there. And the JV 101 local ran pretty much exactly the way it did in KCS days, though in this case it had a pair of BB Bell locomotives. It used to run the ST70 Max. So it interchanged with the Vicksburg and Southern there in Vicksburg. And then we caught the JV 101 local coming out of the tunnel at Vicksburg and chased it over to the Big Black River Bridge at Bovina, which is a pretty spectacular concrete arch structure. So we did really well with that. And then we turned west and started for home. Stopped at Monroe and managed to catch a couple things moving around there. And then we made one last stop along the way, and that was at Wilson's Alley in Shreveport, which if you're going to be in Shreveport, Wilson's Alley is probably one of the busiest spots you can pick. Lots of action through there, and we caught a westbound there towards the end of the day, and then drove the last couple hours west to get to the ranch. All in all, quite a big loop, and I don't know what the grand total was, but Mel went through something like 26 states on the trip by the time we got back to Texas, so he covered more ground than I did. But it was a good good trip all in all. We saw a lot of neat stuff. Alcos, Baldwins, Steam, U18Bs, Bell, GP38, GP40 types. Very neat trip. This series is especially dedicated to my longtime railfan traveling buddy, John Hake. He and I covered a lot of railroading in the U.S. and Canada together. I met him in September of 1982, and we got trackside together quite often. He passed away on April 9th, 2025, from various complications, mostly surrounding his Parkinson's, which put him in a wheelchair the latter part of his life. So this series is for him. My original thought when I started producing Kevin EuDaly's Railroad Adventures was this was a way to take John with us after he could no longer travel. So anyway, I love and miss you, man. We'll see you on the other side. Thanks for watching.